and welcome to I Am with Eric Faria. I am your host, and it is my pleasure to have here, once again, he's coming back this week, Steve Gottlieb, who is a personal empowerment coach. So, welcome back.
Thanks so much, Eric. I'd love to be back here with you.
My pleasure. So, we have a lot to talk about, and I want to start, you were mentioning something related to the 5 principles of EFT, or the 5 main areas that you work in.
Yeah.
What are they?
Well, if you think about it, if you really want a sense of empowerment in your life, then you might notice that certain aspects of your life seem to be working okay, and certain aspects of your life aren't working okay. So if you just basically break it down to looking at 5 general categories of our life, right? Our personal health, our personal wealth, career, relationships, and our spirituality, some people might come to me as an empowerment coach with a focus on one of those particular areas.
Right.
Now, there might be crossover issues between all of those things, but I would start working with them with the expectation that we were going to see positive improvements in one of those particular areas.
So let's say, for example, we were talking about this during our little chat here before we started. Money, that's something that comes up for a lot of people.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. So what do you think might be behind some money blockage, or like personal wealth impediments, if you will?
It could come from many sources. It could be a sense of not deserving. It could be something that happens from our conditioning, where we're taught that money is evil, right?
Dirty.
Dirty.
Yeah.
All of the people with the control and the power use money inappropriately, so it's not good to have money because you might do something wrong with it, or it could be anything related to that, because our internal mental landscape is very, very busy processing all the various different imprints that have conditioned us in our lives. So even though some people really, really want money, there might be something unconsciously that is holding them back from having it, that is trying to keep them safe on some level.
Okay. And you also mentioned that because of these 5 main areas are kind of like a table. So you have the legs, you have to see what's actually holding the thought or the negative.
Well, let me explain that a little bit more. When we do EFT, when somebody comes to me for a problem with financial well-being, for example, we don't just say, okay, even though I'm having problems with financial well-being, I deeply and completely accept myself. That would be what we call a tabletop issue. And what holds up the table are legs. So what I need to do is work with them enough to try to see what specific events happened in their past that started to put in place the mindset or the conditioning that says, it's not safe to have money, I can't have money, I shouldn't have money, I'm not able to have money. And as we identify specific things in their life that are holding up this general issue, and we work on those, and we collapse those completely by going into the memories and discovering the blocked emotions and the energies and tapping on that, slowly but surely what happens is we take a table leg out. And then another table leg out. And then the table, that's really the tabletop issue, financial problems, collapses on its own. And all of a sudden that problem area starts to change, literally change. Because now we're no longer holding the energy of, it's not possible for me, or I can't have it, or it's not safe to have it. That's gone. And as that's gone, you're able to start to resource yourself in a way where having it joyfully becomes a possibility. Using it wisely becomes a possibility.
So you are also talking about the fact that a lot of people walk around, they don't know what is going on, and Once they find something like, the tabletop issue, right? So say money woes.
Yeah.
There are some people who are not ready to do the work. So what happens then? If you find out, let's say, that there was a belief, because there always is a belief behind that tabletop issue, so they're not ready, what is the next step? Is there a way to go around it? Do you just need to give people time?
Well, the best way of going around it is going back to my essential energetic rescripting process that I suggested before. What we're doing now is we're avoiding going where there's trouble in the mind, and we're looking for the subconscious imprints that have been flipped in the wrong direction. So for example, if subconsciously a person says it's not safe to have money, that's a mistake somewhere, that maybe a young person created an idea that must be true, is holding on to, and they don't really understand that their subconscious blocks are sabotaging their success. So I use my technique to sort of root that out by doing intuitive energy testing. And if I find that it's not safe to have money, I'll simply muscle test them to show them that when they say it's safe to have money, their whole energy system tanks. So then we fix that by saying, even though it's not safe to have money, I deeply accept myself. And when we clear those things out, all of a sudden their relationship to money shifts all by itself. So they don't have to be ready to do that work. But if they're really throwing up roadblocks and they don't even want to do that, wait a second, this doesn't make any sense. Why do I want to say that? I will work with them to explain how this technique works. And usually that suffices. But I do run across people who don't want really what they say they want. They really aren't ready. And you can tap, even though I'm not ready to do the work. I deeply and completely accept myself. Even though I don't think this work will do anything for me, I deeply and completely accept myself. And then if the coaching relationship isn't right, we find gentle ways of, letting it go, or I'll refer them, to other ways of dealing with it. Or they just, some people have literally said to me, I recognize now that I'm really not ready to do this work, and I'm just going to have to find ways of being okay with this problem and letting this problem go on my own. And I'll get back to you when I'm ready to do the work. But sometimes what happens is people build protective walls around themselves, and they come really eager to do the work, but they don't even realize that they're not ready to do the work. And as you get close to that protective wall, if you don't safely and gently let them see that that wall is in place and can easily be taken away by tapping through the resistance, then we need to back up and move in a different direction. And if that doesn't work, we just let them go. And that's their life journey. That's their process at the moment, but the life journey continues. Eventually, something will show up in them, in their life in due time, that will help them to recognize that it's time to double down and commit themselves to personal change.
For sure. I totally agree with you. Like, even in my personal life, I remember there were times where I just wasn't ready. So this is great. We're coming to the end of the first segment. Wow. Isn't it amazing?
It's unbelievable.
Okay, so stick with us. We're going to be back more with Steven after the break. And welcome back to I Am with Eric Faria. Once again, I have here with me Steven Gottlieb. I think I got your name right.
You did.
I did. So we were talking in the break about the work that you do with women who have breast cancer using EFT.
Yes.
Can you elaborate a little bit on it?
Yeah, sure. I volunteer for an organization called youcanthrive.org that provides complimentary holistic healing services and counseling services with women with cancer, specifically breast cancer. And they recognize the importance of EFT as a healing agent on many levels. So when a client comes in their organization, they arrange for a consultation with me where I teach them the basics of EFT. So imagine we all have stress in our lives, and now you have a diagnosis of breast cancer. Now your stress has gone through the roof, just from the diagnosis itself. So if I can teach them about EFT and how to do EFT, I'm doing tremendous service for them because stress is the biggest issue. They've got stress on top of stress on top of stress. And as we mentioned before, stress suppresses the body's immune system functions. It turns off the healing processes because when we're in a stress mode, think about what stress mode is. Stress is fight or flight. Fight or flight means there's no time for the body to heal. We're too busy running away from danger.
Right.
But we need all of our senses about us. So when we're in a heightened state of stress, we don't have our full faculties online in our mind. And now we're being given all of this new information about all the things we need to know about our cancer treatments, and they're trying to make important decisions, and the overwhelm from stress is incredible. So at least we can do that. And then as we learn how to use tapping as a regular process for them to help to reduce stress, we can then open up the conversation to understand where traumatic stress had been historically in their life as part of the stress that they're feeling now. So I'll take it, depending upon how open, my client is to having that conversation.
And what are some of the results that you have seen working with these women?
Well, for the women who choose to work with me on an ongoing basis, it really helps them. Everything that's simple enough from I have a important doctor appointment and I'm really stressed out about it, to relaxing, to actually going into surgical procedures being freaked out, to going into surgical procedures being calm, to having negative side effects from treatments and physiological pains as well as psychological ones resolved, so that the physical pain disappears and the symptoms of their treatments the negative symptoms are reduced. Towards going through places in their life where they still hold psychological emotional trauma, which is severe enough that is impacting them whether they had breast cancer or not, to the point where we finally resolve those things. Major traumas that have been resolved through working. And the entree to the work was breast cancer stress, but like any other stress, it's an entree to be able to work in the places in our lives where we're still carrying strong imprints of traumatic wounds.
So from your experience, what do you think is the number one thing that these women have in common? Is it just the stress, or is it something deeper than that?
Well, the number one thing that these women have is a breast cancer diagnosis.
But
so the stress of that alone is a major factor. But what I do find, and of course I'm looking for it because I'm doing my own little informal research project here, is that I'm looking for similar patterns in their personal stress history, traumatic stress. And a lot of these women will tell me, oh, Steve, I'll tell you exactly why I have cancer, because this happened, then that happened, and then that happened, and then I was diagnosed. And it's bam, 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 1, 2, 3. And that's, of course, on top of whatever trauma they had as in their developmental years. So divorce, loss of a mother, accident or illness, something traumatic. It's usually like a 1, 2, 3 punch, and then all of a sudden they're diagnosed. So for some of those women, it's so obvious that they just say with absolute faith that it's true. That's why I have cancer. Now, of course, we don't have any way of medically acknowledging that that's absolutely true, but I'll take it on face value that they believe that.
Yeah, and they probably know their history to where they were, to where they are now, and after being diagnosed with breast cancer. And you mentioned also that you're entertaining the idea of perhaps turning this work that you do with them into a book.
I definitely have plans to do that. I've been working with enough women with breast cancer that I feel that the issue of breast cancer and stress and psychological trauma has never really been put into the forefront. It gets all the attention from a medical remediation point of view, but never from a psychological point of view. Now, that's not to say that women with breast cancer aren't given counseling, therapy, and taught ways of learning how to relax, and maybe as a way, and lifestyle change, but without something like EFT, energy psychology, to really grease those wheels so that literally healing is happening at a cellular level. Shifts are taking place. That may not be complete. The trauma imprints that may have been the precursors to the diagnosis of breast cancer or some other illness are still there.
Yeah, I was actually thinking as you were talking about, so say that there's a woman who was diagnosed, she has breast cancer, she went through the treatment, and now she is diagnosed cancer-free.
Yes.
Right? But there might be the worry there that the cancer might come back.
Well, there always is. So anything that creates worry eventually will become enough of a stress that it suppresses your immune system function. So you always want to be keeping your immune system function optimized. And what we now know scientifically, you see it under a microscope, is that when you tap and resolve psychological trauma, you stop immunosuppressant function and you turn on healing function at the level of DNA.
At the level of DNA?
Yes. You turn on positive DNA function and you turn off negative DNA function.
That is incredible.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah, that is incredible. So I guess the thing is it really works, right? It really gets to the core of these issues, including, in this case,
well, anything we can do to facilitate turning on healing processes and turning off disease processes is going to be to our advantage no matter who we are.
Right. And no matter what we're facing, whether it is breast cancer or just stress from work or whatever.
Eventually, stress unresolved creates physiological problems or symptoms of physiological problems.
Yeah, and diseases, right?
Yeah. Diseases, pains, other kinds of dysfunctional things that show up as limitations in our life, which is quite amazing to have a pain in your back or a pain in your knee and then do the right kind of tapping and all of a sudden it's gone. That's really quite impressive.
It is, and I've experienced that in myself when I was with a throbbing headache and I did some tapping and it was just like gone within 2 minutes and I was like, how did that happen?
Yeah, well, you got lucky, but it does tend to happen more often than not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was quite surprising.
Yeah.
Well, so we have a lot more to talk about before we go.
Okay.
We're coming up on the third segment, so for everybody watching, there's more with Steve after this break. Stick with us. Hello and welcome back to I Am with Eric Faria. I'm just going to jump in because we have a lot to talk about before we go. And we were talking in the break about people that experience like negative experience after negative experience.
Yeah.
And they get a sense of hopelessness.
Yeah.
Like nothing that I do helps me.
Yeah.
Nothing that I do will help me solve this issue.
Yeah.
Can you talk
I just
about
recently wrote something about this, and I termed that as a form of learned helplessness. Because that's your experience. You know, you show up expecting the best, and wham, you get hit with a trauma. And if this keeps repeating as a cycle, we really do, as much as we want positive things happen, start to expect that positive things aren't going to happen. And we walk around with a sense of hopelessness. And that's the worst thing that a person can experience. When there's no hope.
Yeah.
You know, that just tanks our energy system, it closes our heart, and it causes suffering, psychological suffering, which many people experience as depression. You know? So if we can find a way of helping people to find a way to open up the heart again, then amazing things happen. Positive energy flows through the heart, and maybe for the first time, people begin to sense that it's possible that healing and change can happen. They have a sense of hope that was diminished before. And that's the great thing that happens when you do energy psychology. You don't have to work very hard before you start turning that hope back on.
And also, and I mentioned this to you, even the very first time that we met in person, about I go to a therapist, right, to a psychologist.
Yeah.
I've been seeing my psychologist, who is great, by the way, for over 3 years now. And I know people that have been going to like regular psychology or psychotherapy that they have been talking about the same issue for like 5, 6, 7, 10 years.
Yeah.
And it seems to never be resolved.
Yeah.
Why is that?
Well, because nothing shifted in the brain. You're going there to try to resolve your problems. You're trying to understand the problem from the nature of your mind, which keeps thinking about the problem as a wound.
And reliving it.
So what it's really doing is it's reinforcing the negative pathways in the brain that are holding it in place. So it becomes really hard to let it go. Not only that, but if it was traumatic enough, you're just reinforcing the trauma. Strengthening it, strengthening it, strengthening it. And there's no way to let go of that strengthening by talking about it. And it's really not possible for you to use your own conscious awareness to shift it. Unless a real aha moment shows up,
right,
and you can completely shift the energy of it, it's not going to happen. You may come to understand it and be able to manage it better, but you're not shifting it in the level of the brain. So what energy psychology does is it uses these somatic input techniques while we're exposing ourselves to these negative memory imprints, and it literally allows the brain to shift, to untangle those negative neural bundles and start to create neural pathways. The missing element that most psychotherapies doesn't include is the somatic input, which actually opens up the key to change the way the brain is structured.
That is fascinating because I believe that it's, in my own case, like I was even tired at one point of talking about the thing that I was talking about.
Well, it creates a sense of hopelessness. I'm never going to get rid of this problem.
Exactly.
And then what unfortunately some therapy does is say, well, this is what you have to come to understand. This happened to you. This is a wound. Now you have to grow out of it. You have to mature, and you have to live your life even though you have this wound.
Right.
And unfortunately, that's what most people accept. But when we tap, we literally recondition ourselves so that the wound no longer has that negative imprint. It happened to us, but we're no longer carrying that negative wound the same way. We're releasing it. And when you do that, all of a sudden, hope and joy and all kinds of positive experiences literally arise in you as a positive energy flow that didn't happen with conventional therapy.
Yeah, with just a conventional talk therapy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So do you believe that if more therapists, right, like conventional, quote unquote, conventional therapists, psychotherapists, psychologists, if they use something like EFT, that the result would be much faster and much more exponential?
Many therapists who are kind of hip have discovered various different forms of spirituality, so they give people a different place to go. Some therapists have become healers, and they understand energy work, and they do Reiki or various different kinds of touch therapy. But in general, the psychotherapeutic community has sort of put their process in the box and are stuck with talk therapy being a solution where it's not a very effective solution because it doesn't deal with the problem of the energy in the body, which is why energy psychology is a completely different approach.
Right. And by what we're talking about and seeing, it works much, much faster.
It does, because it actually does something to change your brain, which controls the nervous system, which controls your entire experience of life.
Fascinating. So I know that you also mentioned briefly that you worked with people in regards to, was it skiing?
Skiing, especially skiing, golf, or any personal pursuit that is something that's more fun. As much as I'm good at working with someone, even in the core of their emotional, psychological disturbances, I love working with people to shift things that create an instant improvement. I had a friend of mine who I introduced to EFT for psychological issues, and then he left to go on a golf vacation. And as soon as he started to notice that he was getting psychologically upset on the golf course, he decided to try tapping. And he called me up and said, hey, this stuff works. Then I sent him an article about the mental nature of golf and EFT, and he read it 3 times.
Wow.
And his golf score dropped by 10 strokes in 2 days.
Wow.
So that stuff, I hear that and I go, well, that's great.
Yeah.
Skiers have an interesting problem. Skiing is great until you scare yourself because everybody's sliding downhill on a slippery slope, and at some point, the body says, hey, this is dangerous. I want to have fun, but this is scary.
Yeah.
So it develops all kinds of negative conditioning to scary situations. You shouldn't be skiing on places where you're not capable, but if you're capable of skiing on something and you're stuck because of fear and you do some tapping, it allows you to get into that zone where skiing becomes effortless, and then you get to the bottom of the hill and you're going, wow, that was like the greatest run I ever had. How did that happen?
Yeah.
And then you can reinforce that, and people have these positive experiences which build on themselves, which it's just remarkable to do that level of work.
Wow, great. I have never skied in my life, but if I do, I will contact you first.
It'd be my pleasure to help you with that.
Yeah, so Steve, before we go,
Yeah.
I'd like to do some rapid fire
Yes, sir.
rounds.
Sure.
So please, I will say a word, you tell me what comes to mind.
Oh,
okay?
it's like a rickshaw test.
So, connection.
Connection. We are all connected. Whether we think we're separate or not, connection is the most important thing. And we recognize, if you recognize that you're energetically connected with every situation or circumstance in life, and take responsibility for just knowing that that's true, then you would want to, if you're in your right mind, have a positive effect on everything and everyone to the extent that you can. And all you need to do is recognize that connection and send love. You know, be coming from a balanced place, and that connection can have an amazingly positive experience that has no bounds, because everything in the universe, as quantum mechanics tells us, is affected by everything else. No matter what the separateness is, you know, we can change the action of something far away just with a mental intention to do it. So when we understand connection at that level, the impact for world peace, happiness, healing, you know, is incredible.
Fantastic. And since the title of the show is I Am, could you finish this sentence? I know it's not the easiest, so I am.
There's no need to finish the sentence. I am itself is a statement. I am, think about the Sanskrit Aum, Aum. It's another variation of I am. It carries its own energetic form, which is a statement of that unity, consciousness, of connection. I am could also be I am that, I am me, I am that experiences my world. Scripture tells us that when God spoke to Moses, and Moses said, when I speak to the Hebrew people, who do I sent me? He says, tell them, I am that I am sent you. So it represents the highest form of personal and universal divinity.
I love it. So, like I said, so for everybody who wants to get in touch with you, they can just go, all the information will be at the end of the episode, so people can contact you. I hope they do.
I hope so.
This conversation was fascinating.
I enjoyed it immensely.
Thank you for being here.
That's my pleasure.
Yes. So for everybody watching, we're going to be back next week with a new episode. Thank you so much. I'll see you then.